Hey there, crew, it's Mark from Men Who Bullet. Thanks for coming to hang out today, where we're going to go over 5 ways that you can use watercolor inside of your bullet journal. Whether you've never done it before, you're a big old fan of watercolor, or you've never really thought about trying watercolor in your journal, we'll go over ways to use it with lettering, we'll talk about how to use it in a functional way, and no matter what, we're certainly going to be having fun, and we're going to be using a really cool brand of watercolor today that has them all in flat sheets, so it makes it even easier. Let's get started. I'm really excited to continue to work along with Dalton and Cassie. Just so excited about the business that they have and what they're doing with it. And these watercolors are just absolutely amazing. So I have 3 different kinds that you can get here. All of them are made the same way, but it all really depends on kind of the collections that you want to purchase. So if you're interested, you can just buy a bonus pack. It has a ton of colors in it, as you can see here. I've been using these quite a bit over time. What I love about them is that they have all of the colors on the back. And for someone like me, who is color deficient, it's really helpful for me as I'm going through, because also, sometimes it's a little difficult when you're looking at like one side of this and then when it actually gets wet, it looks totally different, especially with some of these really cool ones like these here. Through the process that they are creating these, they create these really cool little like crystal looking pieces on there, and you don't really know the color until you're really looking at it on the paper, in some cases on the back, which is helpful as well. So on top of having these individual packs, if you're interested, they also sell something great which is called the Sidekick, and this is relatively new. What I love about this is that it keeps all of the colors together inside of like a palette. So these are going to be a bunch of reds inside of here. You move into your yellows and oranges, you've got your kind of more yellows, and it continues all the way through. And I love it because if I'm like, hey, I want to be in that green family, I can just come straight to here and pull out whatever color that I want. What's neat also is that these are perforated, so if you wanted to kind of create your own custom palette, you can just tear it along this perforation here, and that way you can flip up what you want and create your own palette whenever you're on the go. If you want to get another pack of them too, this is a similar type approach here. This is the complete edition. So a lot of those other colors that we saw before will be here. But what's cool is that each and every single one of them have a little bit of a description in here as you're going through. So these work exactly the same. They're all the same exact product. It's just that they're laid out a bit differently, and you get a little bit more detail here with each of the colors. For today, we're going to be using the Sidekick. That way I can easily just get to a color or color group that I want without having to shuffle through the other ones. I just like the way it's organized. When working with watercolor inside of your journal, you want to make sure that you have 2 things in mind. One, make sure that your paper can handle it. I'm working with 160 GSM paper. It can handle watercolor. I've used it before. If you want to test out the watercolor first in your journal, go to the very back page if you want to and just put a little splash down and see how it works. If you use too much water, there's a good chance, regardless of the type of paper, unless it's watercolor paper, that it will kind of bleed through a little bit. So we just want to be cautious of that. The other thing is how you put your paint down. There's 2 ways that you can work with watercolor. The first is if you're wetting your page first, and then you're grabbing some color, and then you're going to come back on top of it. It's going to give you a much different look and a little bit more of that watery feel to it than if I just grab the paint right off of the board here and put it onto my paper. If you put too much water on your page, like I mentioned, you're going to sometimes get bubbling. You're going to see it start to ripple up a little bit. So just make sure that you're being careful, and also make sure you don't have anything on this other side of your page that it might bleed onto. During today's session, we're going to be focusing just by pulling up the paint from the brush and laying it on that page. You can do it in different ways by grabbing less paint, more paint, however you want to do it. So the first way that we're going to be using watercolor in our journal is going to be using it along with stamps. This is a really great way if you're not a big fan of creating like artistry inside of your journal, but you want to get some color inside of there. You can use any type of stamp. You do want to make sure that it is waterproof ink that you're using. So something like VersaFine ink is a really great option for you. You're going to press that down, and you're going to give it just a minute or 2 to dry. You don't want to put it on when it's too fresh, because it will still go through the page, because then you're adding water to ink on paper. We're going to go ahead and flip over here to our orange page here. So we've got a bunch of really great orange colors that we can pull from here. And what I like to do is I just like to take different colors, and essentially it's like watercoloring in a coloring book. You're going to pull up a little bit of that paint, and then you're just going to kind of color in the lines or the parts that you want to add into your bullet journal. So in this case, I'll go ahead and add some color to the cassette right there. We'll add a little color to the pencil as well. You can do small little bits, or in this case here with something like the sketchbook, I can lay down a lot more watercolor if I want to really get a cool effect on my page.
If you don't want to go too dark with your colors, because some of them are going to be a little bit different, what you can do is just pull up a little bit of color super lightly and then add a little bit more water. As I mentioned before, you don't want to go too far with the water because you don't want to create a big puddle on your page, but you don't always have to go with a super saturated color. You could add just a slight little tint on here and feel really good about it. And if you want to add a little bit of fun and diversity to your page, use different colors. You can go lighter, you can go darker if you want. And my favorite thing to do with this is actually to let some of the colors bleed together a little bit since they're on there. Kind of makes them look really cool. One of my favorite things to do with watercolor is sometimes just adding that extra little pop of color. I have two different circles here that could be used for something like putting in a date if I wanted to. So I could either put in the date of the 1st, or I could even use this as a header for the beginning of my week for a Monday. I've done two different ways here. On the left-hand side, I actually just use a pencil to go ahead and trace around this, because what I can do is use my watercolor around here, and then once the watercolor dries, I can come back in with an eraser, and then I can erase that pencil line as it's going around, and it's going to make it look like I painted right on the page versus having a black line around it. Or if you feel more comfortable and you want to have that line, which is very cool to do, you can keep it. One of my favorite parts about watercolor is that it is transparent. So you are going to be able to see some of those lines through there. It actually looks wonderful when it bleeds outside of the page. It's some of my favorite type of effects that can happen inside of your bullet journal, along with using watercolor. I come down to this butterfly wing blue down here. Something else that you can do if you want is just ever so subtly adding some dividers to your page. So I've gone ahead and drawn out a box here, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a very light blue color and I'm just going to pull it across the page here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and skip a line, and I'm going to put down a little bit more color. Then I can use this for individual tasks. And then as I'm going down my page, I can just skip every other line if I want to, and I can write out my task for the week. Along with adding subtle lines on your pages, another favorite thing to do with watercolor on my page is actually to add drop shadows. You're just going to draw out the shape that you want to do, and you can create your drop shadow on either side. Easiest way to do it is just move over a little bit from your edges as you're putting it on there, and it can create a really cool effect. You can even make a subtle shadow without even touching your box if you want, just adding an oval right below it to make it look like it's floating on the page. And the fifth and final way that I like to use watercolor in my bullet journal is along with lettering. This is great for your headers, this can be great for your months, whatever you want to do. You can have a ton of fun by adding in and using the black lines of your fine liner, which also make sure that it's a waterproof fine liner, something like Faber-Castell. And that's going to work beautifully with your watercolor here. You're still going to get that really rich color, but still be able to see the detail underneath. I also like to use it as a gradient. You don't always have to go in with just straight paint. You can also leave it a little bit open if you want, or wet your brush a little bit, and then you can just pull the color up ever so slightly. And then the last way that I like to use it with lettering is for small little details. You don't always have to fill in the entire piece if you don't want. You can also create your text with small little openings and add small little dots of your favorite color.
As you can see, I absolutely love using watercolor inside of my bullet journal, and hopefully now you feel a little bit more comfortable with it as well. And you know what? Nicholson Peerless Transparent Watercolors make it even more fun. I love that these are on little sheets. You just dab your brush inside of some water on the sheet, and then you're good to go. Nothing to mix, no craziness. If you want to find out more about these watercolors, definitely check them out online, peerlesslabs.com, and you can also use menwhobullet20 to get 20% off your entire first order from them. If you yourself use watercolor inside of your bullet journal, maybe you have some tips or tricks that you want to share with the community, make sure to drop them down in the comment section below. We'd love to hear from you. As always, thanks for hanging out and happy planning. See ya.